Ah, so. Pode ir? Okay, so can we start? Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you for inviting me. So my name is Gabriel Lesri. I'm the general manager of the Brazilian Hydrogen Association, but I'm also the project leader for the ISO Technical Committee 197 for the Hydrogen Technologies, Subcommittee 1, Work Group 1, in which we developed this standard, the 19870, the technical specification, and then the family of standards. We are working on it. So today I'm very happy to be here, and especially to talk about this family of standards, and we have two very special guests, very special speakers to be here with us today. So this will be a dual session. The first part will be more focused on the international market, and the second one will be focused more on first movers and first adopters, in this case Brazil. So for the first part, the session was organized by DIN and ISO, and the second part was organized by ABNT and ISO as well. So without any further ado, let me invite our guests. The first one is Professor Paulo Emílio de Miranda. He is chair of the International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy, and also president of the Brazilian Hydrogen Association. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And our second speaker is Patrícia Nakashi. Patrícia is the National Hydrogen Officer for Brazil from UNIDO. Okay, well, thank you for coming. It's very good to have you here.
Thanks for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss on the themes we have chosen today.
Thank you.
Okay, so for starters, I'd like to, of course, we're talking about the ISO 19870. That's the standard, the greenhouse gas accounting standard for the hydrogen supply chain, from the raw material extraction up to the consumption gauge. And then we will touch into the 19870-1 as well, which is for hydrogen production. But from the IPH side of it, we know that the methodology that originated this standard came from the IPH itself. So what can you say about the work of IPH into this methodology, but also regarding the international market? How does international standards help support international markets and cross-barrier trade?
Thank you, Gabriel. Maybe it would be interesting to say a few words, first of all, about the IPH, the International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy. Is a government-to-government organization that was created in 2003 and works very strongly throughout all these years to foster the adoption of low carbon hydrogen and fuel cells in the world. And with respect to the standard that you have just mentioned, there is a very interesting history of what has been done. Because during 1 year, in 2022, the IPH committees worked so much trying to model how to account for emissions when producing, storing, transporting, and utilizing hydrogen. And this was a very intense work. And this modelization was then used by ISO. And during the whole year of 2023, ISO worked, and by November 2023, then the standard
right before COP
was issued, right? So this standard had an origin at this work done by the IPH and had an impact, a very positive impact at COP28, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially regarding the mutual recognition of different certification schemes for hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives. We'll talk a little bit more about this mutual recognition, especially when we get into Brazil. I think that this is very important, especially considering Brazil is a first mover for this standard. But before we get into that, let me pass the mic to Patricia. So Patricia, UNIDO has many different activities for developing the industry in especially transitioning and developing economies, but also in other countries as well. And well, there's the International Hydrogen Trade Forum and other activities. And I know that UNIDO has launched a very important guide on the ISO TS 19870 as well. So what can you tell us more about this work that UNIDO does with standards, but also for the international hydrogen market?
Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah, from UNIDO is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and we have our activities on hydrogen are under the umbrella of the Global Program for Hydrogen in Industry. So we have several different projects with technical support, policy support, project development, structuring, and related activities, but all under the guidance of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Specifically for hydrogen, and that you mentioned the Hydrogen Trade Forum. So this is one of the most important activities UNIDO has been doing in hydrogen. We have established 2 years ago in July 2023 the International Hydrogen Trade Forum. This started as initially as a working group for the Clean Energy Ministerial Hydrogen Initiative. This was like an international trade group under the SAM Hydrogen Initiative. And then it enhanced it to be a forum where more countries could join, not only the countries already engaged at SAM. So the idea of the forum is to have each year one country, a potential exporting country, and one potential importing country, hydrogen, of course, hydrogen potential importing country and exporting country as co-chairs. And UNIDO is doing the secretariat of the forum, so engaging, coordinating all related activities. So for the first year, we had the Netherlands as potential importer and the United Arab Emirates as potential exporter. And now we are in the second year, and Netherlands is still co-chairing, but now together with Brazil as the co-chair in this year. So this whole year, it started in in January this year, until the end of this year, Brazil is co-chairing this forum. And why is this important? Why is this related to global standards, especially with the ISO methodology for hydrogen? The main goal of this forum is to foster international trade of hydrogen, but we cannot do this without clear certification, without clear standards, and in this sense, the ISO methodology is really helpful. So you mentioned also the declaration. We launched, can I go still? in the COP28 2 years ago. We worked under the forum, so we have in the forum the other members, like we have around 20 countries now, and the representatives are also representatives of the Ministry of Energy of those countries, the government officials that are coordinating the national hydrogen policy agendas in their countries. So in COP28, we signed, we produced under the forum, we had a lot of meetings discussing the text, and we were able to sign among several countries the mutual recognition of certification schemes on the COP28. So the idea, and in this important to highlight that in the declaration itself, it mentions explicitly the ISO methodology 19700 for hydrogen. So the idea of the declaration is that countries would cooperate in understanding each other's certification schemes in order to have a unique system and to be able to, in the future, trade hydrogen globally as well. So this is one important work we have been doing. The second one you already mentioned is the UNIDO also does, besides governments, we also do a lot of technical work, and one was this also methodology and workshops on explaining a little better the ISO methodology for hydrogen as well.
Sure.
Just to tell you, Patricia, that the International Hydrogen Trade Forum had a meeting, a presential meeting at the World Hydrogen Summit in the Netherlands May this year. And I was there in this meeting, and I was very impressed with the number of representatives from different industries. So the discussion was really very intense. And I think that a very important point considering standardization is the interoperability. That is, with so many representatives from so many countries, from so many different places that have their own rules. So we need to have how to make them comparable, how to make them in a way that it can be used in different places. So it became very explicit, the need for that, during this meeting in May in Rotterdam in the Netherlands.
So you and Patricia mentioned 2 points that I think that are very important to highlight. The first one is that the ISO TS 19870, it was launched before up in 2023, and now we have the draft international standard, the final draft international standard for the 19870-1. So just to give a big picture of what the ISO 19870 family does. So this is a standard for accounting for greenhouse gases in the whole supply chain from the hydrogen up to the consumption gate. So it's the partial CFD of hydrogen up to the consumption gate, from the raw material extraction to the consumption gate. And the first part, the TS that was launched before the COP in 2023, it accounts for this whole supply chain, and it's giving birth to this whole family of standards. So this first part is the 19870-1, is specifically the production of hydrogen, and those are the documents that we send to ISO for the FDs stage. That is the very last stage before the publication of the standards. So those are two very milestones being released in different COPs of different years.
Let me tell you, Gabriel, that I have just received the information that it was issued. So the -1 is now really a standard.
That's very nice. So while we're still at the IPHE level, we do have, we can see an inventory of different certification schemes in the IPHE website. And we know that in the IPHE website there are 28 different certification schemes just for hydrogen itself. And if we count for other derivatives that are not only hydrogen, we can account for around 32. So those are lots of different ways to do the same thing. So, what is the role of these international standards with a very high level of consensus to help people do the same thing in the same way?
Well, I think that the work the IPHE is doing now is first to try to understand it. So an extensive work was developed to evaluate the certification schemes existent in several different countries and to see how they could have points that would interact positively or negatively. So once we have understood what exists and how are these hydrogen certification schemes, there is enormous work being done on trying to harmonize. So harmonization of these certification schemes is absolutely necessary for trading. So this is the work being done now.
That's perfect. And well, I can only imagine that UNIDO, especially working with different transitioning and developing economies, they look very fondly of this standard because those economies are still developing their own regulations for hydrogen. So this is a major milestone to start developing this regulation with an international standard that is already in place. So there's an entry in the agreements on technical barriers to trade that says that when a technical regulation is needed and there's an international standard available about this specific topic of the technical regulation, then this regulation should be based on this international standard. So how is the UNIDO looking into harmonizing the greenhouse gases in accounting for hydrogen in the different countries that it is working? And I'm talking about specifically about Brazil because we are reaching the end of this first part, that is the international market, and we are about to enter into the second part that is regarding Brazil.
So can I read the second part or not? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so as I mentioned, UNIDO has been working with several different governments in establishing. I will talk later about Brazil, but policy support is also one of the main work streams for United Nations, or not only UNIDO. So the idea is that we know that each country is in a different maturity stage of their regulatory framework. Some of them have advanced a little bit and now are going back, changing a little bit. For Brazil, we had, I will go later into this, but we had published last year the regulation. We have been working also with the IEA. The IEA works each year working on the Global Hydrogen Review and also understanding how is each country, in which step is each country for the certification schemes. So the idea is that the countries to support, of course, the main guidance is from the national government. We are just supporting the countries to implement their national strategies. But the idea is also considering that we are coordinating and being the secretariat for the Global Hydrogen Trade Forum and also engaged in several different initiatives. The idea is that we can foster also this harmonization of certification schemes worldwide, and especially as Paulo Emilio mentioned, the interoperability of each one. It's not that we are supporting the government to define the exact same certification. It's not that this is just that it can work in globally as a unique model as well.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And with that, we wrap the first part of this, dual session, that is international part. And now we start looking much more into a first adopter, that is Brazil. And again, we are very happy to have here two very important speakers. Professor Paulo Emilio is part of the managing committee of the National Hydrogen Strategy, and Patricia herself also used to work at the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Brazil and was the coordinator of the National Hydrogen Strategy. And this session is organized by ABNT and ISO, the second part. And what I can say is that this standard, the first technical specification, now the standard, the -1, they were works that were submitted by ABNT and AFNOR for the ISO. And for Brazil especially, this standard is coming in a very important time. And just to give a more clearer view about the hydrogen economy and why this is so important to come right now. So the world already consumes and produces a lot of hydrogen, so around 100 million tons of hydrogen per year. But this hydrogen is not low emissions hydrogen, so it's hydrogen without any kind of carbon abatement. Only 1% of this hydrogen is low emissions hydrogens, that is the hydrogen that is being produced with low greenhouse gases in its supply chain. And there is a projection of going from this 1 million of low emissions hydrogen that we have today up to 48 in 2030. But this is considering all the projects that were announced already. And of course, not all of them will actually come to fruition. So if we trace a line considering the probability of those projects to be actually implemented and actually operating, we can safely see somewhere around the 11 million tons of low emissions hydrogen being produced in 2030. So that's a lot of low emissions hydrogen, and we need to have a way to account for all of that and to make sure that this hydrogen being produced is in fact low emissions hydrogen. And if we look into Brazil, Brazil has a huge potential not only for producing hydrogen but also for consuming hydrogen, for the hydrogen demand. And since it's creating its hydrogen framework, well, the hydrogen law in Brazil has just been released last year, the second semester of last year. This is actually the perfect time to structure its hydrogen certification scheme, the National Hydrogen Certification Scheme, in a way that is very has a lot of consensus with the international market through the use of an international standard. So I'll pass the mic first to Professor Paulo Emílio. If you can talk a little bit about this process of how this hydrogen framework has been structured in Brazil, how it's working, and then we go with Patricia. And I will ask specifically about hydrogen hubs and the importance of the hydrogen hubs, for the incentives for these hydrogen hubs for the hydrogen economy in Brazil, and how this standard can reach into that.
Well, I would say that today Brazil has a very modern and robust framework, considering all laws that were issued on this sector of hydrogen. This is very interesting because people from different sectors of the Brazilian government working on proposing and writing these laws, and subsequently the decree that is about to come out, they searched to have a very broad vision of what existed in the world in the first place. In the second place, the Brazilian strategies and priorities were discussed in such a way that Brazil built the laws that we have today for technological neutrality. And this is something very important because we have a big continental country in which, in different parts of this country, different methods of producing and utilizing hydrogen can come out. Now we have a big challenge, which is demand for low emissions hydrogen, because the low emissions hydrogen produced in the world today is still used in conventional processes like refineries, fertilizers. There is a host of new applications for this low emissions hydrogen. And as these new applications come, and when there will be an increase in the utilization of low emissions hydrogen, more and more certification and standardization will be necessary. So, I think it will be very important, the example that Brazil is giving to the world, not only for the legislative framework that has already been done, but also to say, see, we are going to adopt this international standard because we think this is what has to be done to be able to interact, to trade with other countries.
Just before I pass the word to Patricia, if I may, I think that we are in a very synergic scenario with this international standard and with what Brazil is doing with its regulation, because this standard is very modular. So for the first part, the technical specification, there were some annexes. So the standard is divided into a main body with information for all different pathways, and annexes that are specific for each technology for producing, consuming, converting, and transporting hydrogen. And it is very modular. So during the technical specification development phase, there were some technologies for producing hydrogen, and now for the -1, for the international standards, there are many, many more, including natural hydrogen, for example, the extraction of natural hydrogen, which is very important for Brazil as well, as we know. Which is in the law of Brazil. So, and the standard is also technology agnostic, so it doesn't come with any kind of labeling for hydrogen. And at this point, I think it's important to specify the role of an international standard. So it is a methodology for accounting for those greenhouse gases, but any kind of thresholds of label or labeling are the role of a regulations of any given region. So I think that this is very good to make this standard be adopted, because it is flexible enough to be used to different countries. And for Brazil specifically, this kind of modularity also accommodates the innovative scenario that we see in Brazil for hydrogen. And well, now let's please go to Patricia. And if you can talk a little bit about the hydrogen hubs. So some people may know it with the name of hydrogen clusters or any other different names for this kind of things. But if you can explain us a little bit better the role of UNIDO in developing those hydrogen hubs in Brazil, and how this trade and the access to incentives can be facilitated by using a common standard such as ISO standards. Sure. Oh, of course, yeah. So just to let our viewers know, Professor Paulo Emilio has another meeting just at this right very moment. So thank you very much for coming. I'll ask for a round of applause for him before he goes. And we will continue with our session with Patricia.
Yeah, so now going deeper into Brazil, we have been, part of UNIDO's role is also supporting the Brazilian government in the hydrogen agenda, in the policy development. So in Brazil, the government has established the National Hydrogen Program, and it has 3 main goals, but the main goal is to reach until 2035 hydrogen hubs in all regions of Brazil. So the idea of the hub is have not only the hydrogen production, but attached to it in industrial use, also energy companies, R&D companies, so to make a low carbon energy also in the hydrogen hub all together in the same place. So last year, UNIDO also supported the government in doing a national call for proposals. So we did a hydrogen hub call for proposals aimed at industry decarbonization. And we're happy to announce that we have received 70 proposals. And
It's a lot.
Yeah, and we were expecting a little less, to be honest, and we were very happy with the result. And we shortlisted, among those 70, we shortlisted 5 projects to start working with. So UNIDO is doing, based on these 5 priority projects, we are assessing their needs and what they need to be economic and feasible. And we are attaching to them several different international supports, such as financing, concessional financing, structuring of the financial part, really technical assessments, and so on. So this is what is behind. But behind all that, it's important to know that main guideline is the national government policy. And under the national policy as well, as we are mentioning here, we have 5 thematic chambers, and one of them is the regulatory chamber. I was also, of course, in the government before joining UNIDO. I was the coordinator of this regulatory chamber, and we were able to publish last year in August the national law for hydrogen, which established formally the national certification scheme in Brazil. And in this certification scheme, the law gives the main guidelines. Now the government is working the regulation. Now finishing in the last step of finishing the decree to implement the law. And in this decree also there is a special chapter on certification. And yesterday the Energy Minister in Brazil announced that the decree will be published soon, expected to be next week, let's see. But relating these 2 initiatives, the importance is also the hydrogen hubs. The idea is also to have both industrial use of hydrogen and also export. So maybe one will make feasible the other one. So the companies we also established in the law is the assessment of credit benefits. So there will be tax credits and tax exemptions specific for hydrogen projects and hydrogen hubs in Brazil. And to be able to assess these credits and also to be able to be elected as a hydrogen hub, the companies and the projects have to be considered as low emission hydrogen. And for this, in this sense, this is a relation between the ISO methodology, and so the government is now working in the recommendation, but this including the criteria for what could be considered as low carbon hydrogen in Brazil, and also we're very engaged with the ISO methodology as well. So I think all work is related not only globally in the global trade, as we mentioned in the session before, but also nationally in establishing the main goals of the national energy policy as well.
Yeah, so what I think is very important about the national hydrogen or the Brazilian hydrogen certification schemes for hydrogen is that it is being developed. Well, certification schemes can have many different sustainability attributes, but greenhouse gas emissions is just one of them. But the Brazilian one, the Brazilian National Hydrogen Certification Schemes, is being developed looking into these international standards. So at the same time that it guarantees access to financing and to incentives in Brazil, it also makes Brazil visible to regions, and the producers of hydrogen in Brazil can export this hydrogen and this hydrogen derivatives or products decarbonized with hydrogen to be used in other regions elsewhere. And I think that this is important for the first movers to be on the same page, so we make sure that this market will develop faster than if every region uses a different hydrogen certification schemes. So this is something that I think that Brazil is doing very well, especially looking into using those international standards. So I don't know if you have any questions from the audience.
Yeah, congratulations on your session. It was very interesting, and I don't have a question exactly, but I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you, Gabriel, on your work and leadership and this important development of these important standards in ISO related to hydrogen. And it's very important that we have a Brazilian expert with your background taking to ISO, to the international community, the Brazilian perspectives and interest on...
Have another one?
Yeah, I have one. Or both. Well, my question is regarding transportation, transportation of hydrogen. You know, hydrogen is high inflammable. The ignition point range is very big. And how do you think that ISO or regulations can help to prevent any kind of, because one accident could be devastating.
Okay, so you bring a very good topic. So producing hydrogen may not be an engineering challenge anymore, it's more of economics of scale, but transporting and storing large amounts of hydrogen still is. And the transport of hydrogen is one of the challenges that we have to overcome. But this standard brings some very good news. So for the transport of hydrogen, we do have the gaseous hydrogen, so just hydrogen in gas form. Liquid hydrogen, which is hydrogen that is being compressed and you take out the heat until it liquefies. But we also have other hydrogen carriers, such as ammonia and liquid organic hydrogen carriers, for example. So for these standards, we have the -1 part that is specifically for hydrogen production. So this is the standard that is almost ready, is in the FDIS stage, the final draft international standard. But we do have the -2, -3, and -4 steps as well. And they are already ongoing. We had technical meetings in Paris this semester. And the -2 is specifically for gaseous and liquid hydrogen, so the conditioning of hydrogen and transport up to the consumption gate. -3 is for ammonia, and -4 is for liquid organic hydrogen carriers. So we have the whole supply chain covered. But we do have some new innovative technologies for transporting hydrogen. One of the good things of this methodology for being modular is that as soon as those technologies become mature enough, and we have a group of experts that know how to use it and know how to write a standard about it, we can propose a new work for this kind of hydrogen transporting way and have it be incorporated into this standard. So for example, in metal hydrides or ethanol or any kind of methanol or any kind of other ways to transporting hydrogen. But you bring a very important point. But luckily this is being looked into the standard already. So do we have any more questions? So I think that with that we can wrap up. And thank you so much everyone for being here with us today. And thank you so much for everyone that is online. And yeah, have a good rest of COP.
Thank you.